Hi, I'm Lisa Campbell, Director of the Barry Center for the Arts. Welcome to another episode of Bringing Home Barry. Today, we launched the third video in a three-part series led by Professor Ann LePore. She speaks with alumni from Ramapo's Contemporary Arts program who took an interest in animation.
I am Ann LePore at Ramapo College of New Jersey. I am the convener of visual arts and a professor of animation, and I have with me a recent graduate, Brian Carter. Hello, Brian.
And today I'm here with Jake Stevens, who graduated, how long ago did we decide?
2011, so almost 10 years.
Wow. And I'm here today with Alec Barton. Welcome.
Hi, thanks.
When did you graduate from Ramapo?
I graduated in 2018.
Will you tell us what you do?
I'm a strange 23-year-old freelancing artist. I take pretty photos.
I am a project manager at Click Health, which is a life sciences advertising agency.
Does that mean that you're a project manager?
I help manage a large, diverse team of creative and scientific professionals who create materials that are used in aiding doctors' communications with their patients about the diseases that they struggle with.
I'm currently the head of mobile development for a startup company in Central Jersey.
And what does that mean for people who don't know what mobile development is?
So I do mobile apps. Specifically, I work on the iOS end, but I also have my hands in the Android side as well, but just apps for your phone. Mostly programming, but being a small company, there are elements where I also have to get involved in the design as well, but mostly on the programming end.
My time at Ramapo was kind of a mixed bag. I started with music, ended up in marketing, ended up in visual arts. I picked up a camera at some point in college. My two best friends taught me how to shoot, and then I was lucky enough to find mentors in people like yourself and Bonnie Blake in the visual arts department that gave me a little bit more clarity on where I should be heading.
So you were sampling things in a variety of different majors, really. And how are you applying that now in your life?
I was applying lots of it with freelancing up until recently with COVID.
COVID. Yeah.
Prior to that, a lot of the common things between what I studied was kind of like the psychology of people, which goes a long way into talking with potential clients.
Well, I was actually a comp sci major and a visual art minor, so it was kind of a natural fit in that I had the technical expertise of knowing how to program, but also sort of a feel for just good design, because user interface and user experience is such a big part of mobile development. So having that creative background was also really, really helpful. Some of the graphic design courses I took were like really incredible in just the amount of stuff I learned, and it was also both in graphic design and also in the 3D animation course I took. I was really impressed by how many really talented people were in those classes, and just getting to see the body of work that they produced was like inspiring, and it really made me want to push to do better. That's definitely something that stuck with me.
What I remember about you, Brian, is that you were interested in everything, right? You're interested in like music and art and different styles of art. And you had a couple of side businesses that you were working on, even when you were a student. Do you want to describe those?
So at that time, I was running shows and doing music promotion. I had a setup with a venue called All Star Music Empire, where I would take like a certain percentage of the night, and I would pay myself, pay the venue, and pay the bands. And as a college student, that was absolutely amazing because I had show flexibility, and what I was able to make out of the night was very dependent on my ability to market. Mm-hmm. And I knew a lot about graphic design and I knew a lot about music, so I was really primed for running shows that way. But in terms of flexibility and income potential as a college student, it was fantastic.
How did you take the leap between things you were doing while you were in college to things after you graduated?
It was definitely not what I was expecting right after I graduated. It took a lot longer than I thought it was going to, and I ended up in a place completely different than I was expecting. My degree was focused on visual communications design, and right after school, I went at that as hard as I could. I ended up freelancing for a few years on my own, different smaller stays in studios and smaller agencies, kind of on a per project basis, while supporting a roster of clients that I grew out of my own business. From there, I decided to try and switch and move in-house, and it's at that time when I moved into like the network agency realm and switched mostly from small business into healthcare. All in all, from the time I graduated to the time I switched into healthcare is probably about 4 years.
My situation was a little strange. I graduated early, worked my butt off for like 2.5 years straight to graduate a semester ahead. Sometime around March, I dislocated my shoulder. Pretty much the only thing I could do while I was recovering was take pictures. So I got really good at taking pictures during my physical therapy process, and that was like a really good integration to freelancing, and that kind of like set me up foundationally to just like take off from like a compositional and a networking standpoint.
It was really interesting. A lot of changing of jobs and positions. It was a lot of freelance work in that time, and kind of when you immediately leave college, you're always kind of struggling to find your first real job. So there was definitely a good period of time where, like you said, it was like a transition period.
Of all your experiences when you were a college student, is there an experience that stands out as like the most positive experience?
I would have to say it was my two friends that I made my very first week of school, Jake and Jelly. They taught me how to use a camera after I picked one up, and I never actually put a camera down after that.
I'd say probably the most positive college experience is just the social aspect of having so many people around you that are also sort of in the same life experience, and just having your friends and everybody else. It makes for a really good, positive experience.
I had an opportunity to take an independent study course with one of the communication arts professors, and that was a really great opportunity to both learn more about a topic I was extremely interested in, and then kind of take it farther than I would have a chance to in a normal classroom setting, really setting my own parameters about what I wanted to focus my studies on, how I could achieve the goals I had outlined at the beginning of the course, and really following that through until the end with a nice complete project. The methodology that was instilled in my education kind of from the beginning with the communication general classes through into my concentration classes. And, you learned this in this class, and in the next class we take it a little bit farther, even kind of like across different departments, right? The visual arts classes are different than the communication arts classes, but there's a lot of overlap. You can pull things from one into the other, and just having like a consistent faculty that I was working with, kind of like we're able to see like what your strengths and weaknesses are, and allowing you like the opportunity to kind of grow where your strengths were, instead of like forcing you into like a very narrow track of like, you have to do this, you have to do that, or you're not going to be successful.
Is there a school project that you feel in some way gave you something that you were able to carry to after you graduated?
For senior project, actually, for computer science, it is just to design from start to finish a completely functional program, and you have a lot of freedom within that space to kind of go in whichever direction you want. I did an iOS app, and that was sort of my first real experience in that regard. It was a game called Crop Farm, where you just farm crops and you build your farm. It's a very simple app, and the fact that it was my first real time doing every aspect of development, from the actual like design and engineering to the more visual aspects to the programming. So that was a very exciting thing, and I think that kind of set the tone for the rest of my work. But it was a lot of fun to make.
The dollhouse.
The dollhouse, yeah, that was it.
Yeah, the hand comes down, and there's like the little furry dancing guys.
It was really fun to make. It was really challenging. I definitely stayed in the lab overnight a couple times using all of the computers to render different pieces of the footage. It taught me a lot about kind of animation practices and techniques that we didn't cover directly in the classroom, but were things that I really wanted to do for this, so I figured out a way to do it. And I was pretty happy with how it came out. It was fun.
Is there anything that you've worked on recently that you would want to share with us?
I feel like I did some good stuff for my parents, like Cafe, the Lambertville Trading Company. It's a coffee bar in Lambertville, New Jersey. It was a rebranding project, kind of some packaging options. Over time, it's morphed into things for digital with a website, e-commerce, and some social media.
So another project that I worked on was Foggy Glasses, which was another small startup app that was for sharing news with your friends. And the whole premise of the app was to create small groups of friends where you could share articles and stories between each other and then have good feedback and discussion on them. The logo was like these fogged over glasses reading a newspaper.
You send me a lot of email updates about strategies that you've been using for freelance photography and for other things. Can you talk to me a little bit about some of the strategies that you're using?
With freelance work, you go one of two ways. I guess with all work, you go B2B or you go B2C. So B2B means business to business. And in a freelancing sense, that was a lot of vendor to vendor type stuff. Like if I was applying to shoot under another photographer or work as an assistant under another photographer, that would be B2B. Or B2C would be business to consumer, where, say, my message was oriented at getting myself a client, which is better paying. So, like, the big difference is B2B is less risky and more predictable, but it doesn't make as much money. B2C is more risky, less predictable, but your income potential is pretty limitless in terms of if you're creating your own clients and prices. I was initially doing a lot of B2B work in Facebook networking groups, and that was working for a little bit, but it was a lot of competition with other photographers and other vendors, since B2B is kind of like your way in freelancing. So I actually ended up moving my strategy, like still doing partial B2B, but focusing on more B2C consumer type stuff. So like a big source of income for me was weddings. But what's happening right now is because COVID crashed 2020, a lot of couples are rescheduling to 2021 and 2022. So that makes this a great time for B2C because there's about triple the people looking that there would be normally.
For students who are in school and maybe they're struggling with the idea of, they want to do something creative, and what they hear maybe from the outside is artists starve and you should be something else. What do you tell them?
A lot of it really comes down to who the person is and what is really important to them and what's going to make them happy at the end of the day. Finding something that is both engaging enough to you and allowing you to learn and keep learning while also meeting the financial requirements and the kind of broader life requirements that you have out of a job, I think is really important. To find something that hits all of the marks, like right off the bat, is extremely difficult. You may find yourself going through a job that sounds really great on paper, and maybe that's not a great fit for you, and you use that experience and you kind of tailor your job search for the next job with everything you learned in mind, and you do that until you find something that you're really happy with, and you're comfortable at work, you enjoy your coworkers, you enjoy the work that you're doing, and it's not stale.
If you're currently in college, I would start thinking right now about what your source of side money is, because creative fields, they can be lucrative, but they're usually super unpredictable and hard to get the process started with. Something like camera gear is super expensive, and you could drop like 10 grand at a time. And I feel like I could have feasibly potentially had at least a good start to that if I started investing like my freshman year of college. Whereas now, if I want to get camera gear, I have to work my butt off for it. It just would have helped me to have that source of side or passive income And it doesn't have to be like stocks, that's just my recommendation. But thinking about where your nest egg is coming from is important.
My only advice would be just to make the most of your time in college, because there's so many great resources at Ramapo, to really just make the most of those, because you're going to appreciate them in the long run. Ramapo's a good tight knit school too, and that like I think people from Ramapo kind of stick to like keep in touch and stuff.
Putting yourself out there in a lot of situations that may be uncomfortable or unfamiliar to you, you don't know what's going to happen when you graduate, and you find your footing and you figure out what's going to work for you. And sometimes you end up in a place that you don't intend to go. I didn't expect to be in the position or the field that I'm in right now, but it's not something I'm upset about. This is different than what I went to school for, but I found that this is actually like a much better fit for kind of my personality and my strengths on an all day long, everyday basis.
Yeah. Yeah, and you shouldn't feel bad about changing your mind or adapting to different circumstances.
A lot of people, they have their experiences in school, and there's only so much variety that can be on the resume. People that are all studying the same program, even at different schools, are going to have a lot of similar experiences. They're probably going to have a lot of similar projects in their portfolios. If you know someone that can introduce you to someone else and vouch for you, it goes a whole lot farther than if you had like an absolutely sterling resume. I think a lot of people just really like working with people that they like and people that they know and they're comfortable with, because it's not what you learn in school that makes you a good employee. You can train people to do most jobs on the job. It's having like the desire to put in like the hard work to learn something that you may not know before, and like those kind of intangible qualities are, I think, really important. And have fun, because you have to have fun. If you can't just slog through work all day.
Now that everything is like in a small screen on our phones,
Design is everything.
Design is everything now. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank you to Ann LePore for leading this 3-part series. Thanks for watching.